morning, and thank you for joining us for our presentation. We have policy developments in 2019 as our topic this morning, brought to you by AEE Solar. Before we begin, and while we wait for folks to log on, I'm just going to cover a few details about the webinar. If you look to the right side of your screen, you'll see the control panel from GoToWebinar. There's a questions pane there, and that's where you're going to be able to communicate with me as we go through the webinar. If you are experiencing any technical difficulties, or if you're not sure you're seeing the right screen, or you're not sure you're logged into the audio, feel free to type in any questions in that questions pane and shoot them over to me, and we'll try to get you all ready to go here. A couple of other notes. We will have a Q&A session following the presentation. You're welcome to submit your questions at any point during the webinar, and we'll do our best to answer as many as possible after the presentation. And again, that's right through that questions box you'll see on the right-hand side of your screen. There will also be a brief survey that will pop up in a new window once you end the webinar. There's only a couple of questions, takes a couple of minutes. We're just looking for your feedback and any suggestions for topics for future presentations. We'd love to make these as valuable as possible for you because we know you're busy. And if you complete that survey, I'll email you a copy of this presentation later today. So you'll see that there's a lot of good information in here that you won't want to miss out on. All right, and for those of you who have joined in, really quickly, if you're experiencing any technical difficulties, you can send me a note through the questions box on the right-hand side of your screen. I'll get to those as they come in. And also, if you have any questions throughout the webinar, feel free to submit those questions through that questions box, and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. All right, well, it doesn't look like there are any questions so far, so we'll introduce our presenters today. We have Andy Newbold, Sunrun's very own Senior Manager of Public Affairs, and Alex McDonough, Sunrun's VP of Public Policy. Andy and Alex, I'm passing it over to you.
Thank you. Appreciate you having us. So we'll do a quick rundown of the topics we plan to cover and look forward to answering any questions you all have. I'm Alex McDonough and VP of Public Policy. I've been with Sunrun since the beginning of 2017, and I oversee our state work and policy teams working on Western states policy, legislative, and regulatory affairs, as well as our federal efforts, which I'll focus on today. And we'll leave coverage of our state policy updates to Andy.
Yeah, this is Andy Newbold. I'm the Senior Manager of Public Affairs. I run a lot of the communications efforts, leveling up some of our top policy priorities. But I'm actively involved in most of our campaigns across the country, so we'll be able to give you a good overview of the different things we're working on, and also how we can potentially use your support.
So just quick overview of our 2019 policy priorities that we're going to run through. And this is what guides the entire policy team, which now is, I think, 21 or 22 people strong. And we have capacity that ranges from regulatory expertise, legal expertise, communications, very, very strong on communications, and we serve all of Sunrun. So our priorities are fair compensation, which includes a lot of rate making in state commissions, but some legislative work to ensure that our customers have the ability to get a good value from their rooftop solar systems and batteries. Cut red tape. That's it's a long-term focus, but of Sunrun and the solar industry. But we've doubled down on our efforts with a national campaign to reduce the cost of permitting at the state and county level. which the costs of delays and duplicative inspections and lead to loss of customers and higher customer acquisition costs, which is a drag on the whole industry. So we're working on national solutions and encouraging more engagement from as many players in the industry to engage with their city and county governments to help us spread the word and get the tools we're working on in their hands. Battery growth. Brightbox is a marquee product for Sunrun, and in the future expect it to be our primary offering. Today it makes up 10% of our new systems nationwide and 25% in California. And consumer-centered, if our customers have a bad experience, then we're not doing our job. So as the policy team, we look for policy-driven opportunities and responding to interest in consumer protection, to use it as an opportunity to continue furthering the customer experience. So fair compensation, this is just a quick snapshot of what we're looking at, just to highlight a couple really important pieces. Time of use rates in California. Folks who have engaged in California have seen the implementation over the last year and a half of mandatory time of use, and that's just effectively higher rates during peak hours, which are becoming between 4 to 9, 5 to 10 p.m. Different in different utilities, but generally those ranges. We also have time of use rates in Arizona and exploring time of use rates in other states like New York and Hawaii. So we expect to see more time of use optional proposals or mandatory time of use in states in the future. We see that as time of use can be designed poorly, but it can also be designed in a way that's beneficial for storage and drives our movement towards adoption of storage. But it takes a lot of time and attention to get right, and we end up working on a lot of proceedings to use that as a positive for the market. Cutting red tape. This is something that I think that is going to be seen more broadly by the industry in coming days. Solar Energy Industries Association, our primary national trade association, is doing a webinar rolling out this initiative more broadly next week. And if anybody is interested, we can make sure that you have the login info and distribute it more broadly. But the goal right now is to work with partners such as SEIA, the Solar Foundation, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, several other companies, Tesla, Mosaic, SunPower, who engaged in the initiative, and we're trying to expand to companies across the spectrum in size and markets to contribute to the development of a national online permitting portal. Online permitting helps reduce the time and potentially the cost, but it also gives us it also gives us a platform for standardization in cities and counties nationwide. So we don't expect development of this portal to solve all the problems, but it's the ability to communicate with the cities and counties and drive towards standardization for process of accepting permits and doing inspections if an inspection is even needed, and a mechanism to build a support from cities and counties to cut red tape for installing solar. This is not going to be a near-term, it won't deliver near-term results like within the next month or two, but it is the 2, 3, 4, 5-year plan of driving counties towards this standardization and going online that we're working on, and it takes a lot of work and a lot of people jumping into this effort. So if you're interested, we would love to have you join us. Battery growth. Just nationally, we're working on incentive programs, rebate programs, and rate designs, and we were excited to announce that our grid services team led the 20-megawatt contract in the New England ISO for aggregating systems in the Northeast. The New England ISO is the wholesale market that for the Northeast, and this was the first of a kind for solar and battery storage being aggregated behind people's meters and sold into a wholesale market. So it's really changing the landscape. In consumer-centered, I think putting our customers first speaks for itself. So on federal advocacy, our top priorities, I'll focus on the top two, extending the solar investment tax credit, and then permitting legislation and support, which gets to the cutting red tape that I just talked about. Extending the solar investment tax credit. So in 2015, the Congress passed legislation that extended the ITC for 3 years, and go to that slide. Passed an extension of the investment tax credit for 3 years that at full 30%, and it begins stepping down, and then over the next couple of years, we have the ability to, and all companies that take the business investment tax credit have the ability to safe harbor some equipment and preserve the ability to install systems at the 30% rate. But nevertheless, we still have this step down coming up, and the credit will be at 10% after 2022. And any system installed after the end of 2023 will be subject to that 10% credit, regardless of safe harbor. So we are working with the Solar Energy Industries Association and others at a national level to build congressional support for extending the investment tax credit. We can't pinpoint exactly how long an extension would look like or when it would happen, because Congress isn't the most functional institution ever. But we are optimistic that there is growing political support. We've seen positive news articles recently and had very good conversations with both Senate and House members that there is strong interest in keeping the ITC going. The public policy justification for this, so folks know, is really that the environment has changed. The policy environment on the federal level has changed for support for clean energy and climate change. In 2015, when the ITC was extended, we had the Obama-era Clean Power Plan, which was effectively regulations on fossil fuel-fired power plants to reduce carbon emissions. Today, we don't have any federal policy reducing carbon emissions from federal power plants or from power plants. Additionally, we didn't have the global safeguard tariffs on solar panels from nearly every country. So with those two changes in federal policy, we found that there's significant interest in bridging the gap, figuring out how we can continue driving growth in the renewable energy industry and solar in particular through the tax credits. But again, Congress is fraught with procedural delays and political factors that make it hard. But we are going to be working very closely with our allies on Capitol Hill and within the industry to extend the tax credit. And you may be down the road seeing advocacy emails or outreach from our team or other organizations asking you to write your member of Congress to support the extension. A quick tariff update. So the 201 tariffs that I mentioned, those are the solar-specific tariffs that the president adopted in February 2018 that started at 30%. Just to refresh folks' memories, that tariff is imposed over 4 years and steps down by 5% each year. So right now we are on the second step of the tariff stepping down 25%, and we'll be at 20% in February 2020. The activity around that today has been companies have filed for exemptions. Utility scale solar companies have filed for an exemption of utility scale of larger modules, and Sunrun and REC collaborated on an exemption request for REC's panels. But the U.S. Trade Representative Office, which is responsible for the decisions here, has not made any decisions on modules other than SunPower's, after SunPower was purchased by or after Solar World was purchased by SunPower. And I think that's, the midterm review. So you may start hearing news about the U.S. Trade Representative doing midterm review on the 4-year tariffs. This is required by law. The USTR has to review whether the tariffs have been effective at bringing domestic manufacturing. To date, we haven't seen substantial benefit from the tariffs for manufacturing, and so it's questionable what the conclusions of the report will be, but that process is just beginning now. The Solar Energy Industries Association will be leading for the industry the effort to promote rescinding the tariffs under various arguments, including that they haven't been effective and have been damaging for the industry. Given the trade posture that the White House is in right now with China and the hard line that they've taken on tariffs generally, we're not relying on any changes to the tariffs in 2020 and 2021. So our expectation is that they remain in place for the duration of the 4-year period, so through February 2021. So if there are any questions on where those tariffs are, I'm happy to answer them. And then quick mention, there's also another set of tariffs that are China specific that you've probably heard about. Recently, the president announced an increase of 10% tariffs that were imposed on $200 billion of imported Chinese goods to 25%. And there has been discussion about extending that tariff even broader to cover more consumer goods. So this $200 billion tranche of tariffs, the so-called list 3 of Chinese tariffs, do cover some components that we're watching closely, particularly inverters. Now to Andy.
Thanks, Alex. Now I just wanted to go over some of the key state campaigns that we're focused on. And, I mentioned this to Hannah, but please feel free to ask questions at the end of this, and we'll do the best we can, or we'll follow up with you after the call, and definitely think of us as a resource. If you have any questions about policy or want to get involved, we'll be here and happy to work with you. Always looking for additional support. So just to go over some of the key state campaigns, California obviously is probably our biggest priority at this point in time. There's a lot going on here. NIM 3.0 conversations are underway. Alex mentioned time of use rates are moving into effect and changing. So, we're closely tracking that. I think the NIM 3.0 conversations are probably still a little ways out, but we're definitely paying close attention. Multifamily and new homes, mostly the new homes is probably of interest, which will be going into effect soon. So we're tracking that closely to make sure, to watch how that's going to be implemented. Grid services in California, this is a really great place, testing ground for grid services. We have several pilots we're looking at, and then also we just recently wrote a paper for LADWP, concept being how aggregated solar and storage could replace the gas plants down there, along the same lines of what Alex mentioned in New England with Sunrun participating in the capacity markets up there. We're trying to bring that same concept everywhere. And I would definitely encourage you to check out our LADWP paper and understand that concept as a future-looking idea. And then lastly is the wildfire solutions. This is something we're really paying attention to from a public affairs standpoint and communications standpoint. It's pretty intuitive, the idea of the utilities are callously sometimes walking around saying they're going to shut off power for 5 million people 2 to 5 days at a time. That's just PG&E. The other utilities are saying the same thing. So millions and millions of people across the state losing power 2 to 5 days at a time, and much more frequently than ever before. And so naturally, we want to offer a solution. The utilities aren't offering solutions. They're just telling us that there's a problem. So it's a really great opportunity to demonstrate the value of solar and storage. There's been a lot of conversations about quote unquote microgrids as well to help communities at large, hospitals, and first responders. But of course, we're focused on trying to get these resources and assets into communities so individuals can keep their lights on when the utilities shut them off. So specific policy solutions there include trying to encourage the Governor Newsom, who announced $75 million in wildfire relief, trying to encourage some of that money to go towards increasing the adoption of solar and storage. We're also looking to expand the SGIP, which is essentially a rebate for storage. I'm sure you're all familiar with that. So looking to expand that in a variety of different ways, and happy to follow up with you if you have any specific questions on that stuff. In New York, Alex mentioned our national effort to cut permitting red tape. There's still many places in New York where you can't install a battery because of permitting issues. So, we're constantly trying to chip away at that. There's also conversations underway at the commission in New York for the next step with net metering and successor rate design and tariffs. There's been a mention of a fixed fee that could go on individual homes. We're advocating strongly to not have a fixed fee or drastically reduce the proposed fixed fee. And then there's also been some conversation around demand charges that we're paying attention to, but and advocating against. And then in addition, we're always trying to capitalize on the storage incentive possibilities in New York and everywhere. In Puerto Rico, you may have recently heard they passed 100% renewable energy by 2040. There were a lot of really great things for distributed solar in that legislation. So we're looking right now towards implementing those. That includes automatic interconnection, protections on net metering for many years, grandfathering, just a laundry list to really get that market going. So we're looking at implementation there. We're also paying attention to federal support to help rebuild the energy infrastructure there and how solar and storage can play in, as well as grid services opportunities. Puerto Rico and Hawaii, the islands where it's so expensive to get fuel there, are just prime for launching some of these aggregated solar and storage projects. And three more to highlight. Illinois is a really interesting one for those that have assets and operations in the Midwest. This legislative session is ending this May. There's legislation that's been proposed called the Path to 100, which involved in that are specifically extensions to net metering and the incentives for solar and storage. And there's also currently a cap on what's counted as on what can receive incentives. So system sizes are capped at 10 kW right now in Illinois, and we're trying to expand that to 25 kW and really grow the market there. So this is a critical piece of legislation. We're hopeful that we can get something passed in special session in November. So if anyone's interested in helping us advocate for that, please reach out. And in South Carolina, breaking news this morning, the governor signed the Energy Freedom Act, which essentially expands net metering in South Carolina, lifts the cap on net metering in South Carolina, and lifts the cap on solar leasing. It also had a variety of utility scale items, and is just generally positive news for the state and the Southeast at large. You know, this was a 3-year-long battle with lots of ups and downs. This is a bill that had strong bipartisan support and was actually led by Republicans. So it's something, you know, we're taking across the country to say, to showcase how Republicans are showing support for renewable energy like solar. And then in Massachusetts, we're currently looking at a variety of interconnection issues associated with batteries. As Alex mentioned before, ISO New England news, you know, specifically related to Sunrun, we are, you know, aggregating our solar and storage up there. And so we need to get past some of these interconnection issues so that we can drive adoption of batteries and meet the needs of that capacity market promise. In addition, we're also paying attention to a variety of fixed charge proposals and demand charge proposals at the DPU. And just a few other states to note for the call in case any of you are operating in those states and want to reach out to us offline about them. You know, we're paying attention to Connecticut, where they're looking to bring net metering back after it was dismantled in the last legislative session. We're paying close attention to some legislation in Texas. We are watching Wisconsin and Michigan, and let's see, Maryland passed the Clean Energy Jobs Act, which would reinvigorate the SREC market in Maryland. They passed that legislation, and now it's in the governor's hands for signature, and we are hopeful that he will either sign it or and move it into law. So we have until the end of the month for that. So we're advocating heavily there in Maryland as well. How we do this. This is some of the stuff Alex already mentioned. You know, for example, we litigate these cases in regulatory proceedings. We're lobbying federal and state government agencies in the legislature, and we're partnering with utilities, NGOs, and other tech firms to drive these conversations forward. Where I'm mostly focused is what we call the outside game. So that's our communications efforts, and this is, you can see grassroots and stakeholder engagement. That's the organizing of advocates. We work with both Solar, the Alliance for Solar Choice, Solar Rights Alliance, SIA, to bring people together, bring people power to the conversation, and we use those voices and we elevate those voices through a variety of media, including paid, which is some advertisements in local newspapers or online, earned media, which is kind of the news stories where we're working with the reporters to shape the news narrative, and owned media, which is the op-eds and letters to the editor that you see that are about solar, are often driven by advocacy groups, including ourselves. And then, of course, social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram are ripe for bringing advocates' voices to the front of the conversation. This slide is just really to showcase for everyone on the call just what we're up against. I just updated these numbers from 2017 to 2018, and they had grown quite significantly, actually, which is terrifying. To help break down, and I know it's a lot of words, 264 solar policy and rate changes were proposed, pending, or enacted in 47 states. So that just goes to show you the barrage of bullets that this industry is dealing with on an annual basis. 264. It's impossible for we would have to have thousands of people on our staff to manage all of these different policy and rate change proposals across the country. And so that's why, when I'm showing you 6 states at a time as our focus, that's taking all of our bandwidth. But, this is what we're up against. And some of those other bubbles really break down some of the specific proposals that were offered that are frankly going after distributed generation and rooftop solar pretty aggressively. That includes, you can see 77 requests for increased fixed charges last year. 71 states considered changes to distributed generation compensation policies that essentially can be translated to a tax on net metering.
And there are only 50 states, so these attacks are coming multiple times in the same states.
Yes, in different ways. That can be regulatory or legislative. And 23 utility requests for demand or solar specific charges. And then an increasing amount of states are coming after the ability for companies like Sunrun to actually be allowed to lease solar and storage, which would greatly reduce access. So how you can help? Definitely looking, Hannah said she would send this presentation around, but as much as you can, get involved. We would certainly appreciate, especially the smart voices that are associated with AE members, writing letters and making phone calls, and just generally paying attention. You can follow us at the Alliance for Solar Choice and Facebook, Twitter. You can sign up for our emails and newsletters. If you're in California, Alex can tell you a little bit more about the Solar Rights Alliance, which is somewhat new, right?
Yeah. Solar Rights Alliance is an organization that is an independent voice for solar customers. We have helped support the launch together with the California Solar and Storage Association, Mosaic, Vivint, SunPower, Freedom Forever. A number of solar companies have supported their launch, but none of the solar companies are on the board or in control. We are working to advertise Solar Rights Alliance to our customers and give and incorporate it into our process for when new customers receive their packet after the sales process to receive an option to opt into joining the Solar Rights Alliance. But once a customer joins Solar Rights Alliance, they have the organization has its own executive director and collaborates as part of the coalition of solar champions in California advocating at the legislature. They were instrumental in getting the Sacramento Municipal Utility District to withdraw an atrocious and dangerous proposal that would have made it effectively impossible to sell solar to new customers in Sacramento. So they've already shown to be an effective organization in just a year and a half, and they're working to rapidly grow their member roles. So if you have any ideas or want to help them recruit, please join and let us know. We would be happy to put you in touch directly with the executive director, or you can probably find them through their website. But it's a powerful voice in California, and we need to continue promoting customers to join it.
The NRA of solar. We would also encourage you, as I said, to email and call your federal and state legislators and utility regulators, the commissions, and just voice your opinion there. Definitely always welcome, and then support SEIA, the Solar Energy Industry Association, Vote Solar, Grid Alternatives, and of course, local environmental groups to help move these things across the finish line. So with that, Hannah, that's all we have, and open to questions.
All right, thank you, Andy and Alex. We will kick off our Q&A session, so if you have any questions, feel free to submit those over, and we'll get to the ones that come through. In the meantime, while we wait for those questions to come in, I'll just remind everyone that you can exit the webinar at any time during or following the Q&A session. Just remember that survey will pop up in a new window once you exit the webinar, and to complete that survey so that you get a copy of the slides that were just presented. All right, feel free to send those questions over. I'll just make a couple of other notes while we wait. We will have our next webinar next Friday, May 24th, and the topic will be how to sell solar and storage. And you can also check out our website for more training opportunities with AEE Solar. That's just aeesolar.com. We've got all of our webinars, workshops, and upcoming events listed there for you. All right.
Maybe it was the perfect presentation.
Maybe it was. I do have one comment that came through, I think for you, Andy and Alex. Our dealer says, I'm in Pennsylvania, and we have 100% RE legislation on the table. We have an advocacy day coming up if you're interested.
Yeah, definitely. Please contact us. We have a state lead who covers the Mid-Atlantic and is actively involved in Pennsylvania. Of course, the one state I didn't mention, but definitely actively involved there, and would love to participate in any activities that you have going on. So I don't know if you, Hannah, can connect us directly with them, but we would love to work with them.
Great. Dave, I'm sending you Andy's email here, so you can connect on that. All right, and we do have another question that came through. Are there any policies for the state of Florida that you can discuss?
Fortunately, Florida right now is quiet, but I would characterize it as calm before the storm, because they do have two gnarly utilities there. We are currently only in Duke Energy territory, but Florida Power and Light is owned by NextEra, which is also a very aggressive utility on the policy front, with an enormous policy team and big political spend. So, we've had policy fights in Florida in the past to protect customer access to rooftop solar. You probably remember the ballot initiatives from 2016, but we prevailed. And so right now, we are enjoying the calm in Florida. The Sunrun legal and policy team worked on opening that market for third-party owned systems in, I think that was last year. Yeah. And we advocated directly before the commission to open it up, and we were the first company to offer TPO that I'm aware of. And other companies followed behind us, replicating that decision. And so, so that has been a game changer for us in Florida, and we will see what policy fights we get into in the future. But hopefully, we are growing quickly enough, building a base of customers. But we will be very, very heavily engaged in Florida to make sure that we can keep the market strong.
Yeah, and just to put a fine point on some of that, just for your perspective, I heard the other day from our lobbyists, our industry has like maybe 2 lobbyists altogether. Florida Power and Light has 60 lobbyists in Tallahassee, so they're incredibly engaged. That's just one utility, not including all of Duke's lobbyists, which are maybe equal. I have no idea what Duke has, but we're battening down the hatches and waiting for the storm. I also would note that Florida has some of the longest interconnection for solar systems in the country. So, to the extent that we can constantly be working with local jurisdictions to make that a little bit better, would be helpful to the industry for sure. It's not to say there's nothing going on at all, but relative to what we've seen in the past.
And that's why it's so important for these new initiatives that we've been working on to organize our customers. There's been, we've worked with outside sales teams, legacy, our inside folks, and to show up for public meetings and show up to the legislature to advocate for important legislation in the past in various states. But we have largely untapped the customers, and we have seen other industries very successful at doing that. Andy mentioned the NRA, for example, and that's why we are working on this capacity, because we will never outspend the utilities, at least not in the near term, but we can certainly out-organize them, and we can build popular support, and that's what we're working on doing, is mobilizing. So we win we continue prevailing in these policy challenges. And we need all the help we can get.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you both. Well, I guess that will wrap up our Q&A, and if you complete that survey, I'm including Andy's contact information there, so if you have any other questions later, you can follow up with him directly. But thank you both for presenting, and thank you for everyone who joined the call.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a great weekend, everyone.